In the Shaolin Mountains, fear was never treated as an enemy. It was treated as a signal. A young monk once asked his master, "How do I remove fear from my heart?" The master replied, "If you try to remove it, it will control you forever." This is the paradox that confuses most people. They believe fear must be eliminated, suppressed, conquered. But the Shaolin understood something different. The moment you try to escape fear, you divide yourself. One part runs, one part resists, and fear grows stronger in the space between. That is why fear never disappears when you fight it. It only disappears when it is fully met. Right now, you are afraid of many things: failure, loss, rejection, uncertainty. And every time fear appears, your instinct is the same. Think faster, distract yourself, escape the feeling. This is why fear feels overwhelming. Not because it is strong, but because you are never fully here when it arrives. The Shaolin principle does not remove fear. It ends its control instantly. Fear demands only one thing from you: your absence. The moment attention leaves the body, fear takes command. This is why panic feels sudden. You were not overwhelmed, you were displaced. The Shaolin saw this clearly. They never asked how to be fearless, they asked how to remain. Remain in the feet when the ground feels unstable. Remain in the breath when the chest tightens. Remain in posture when the urge to flee appears. Presence is not an action, it is a refusal to leave. When fear is fully met in the body, it cannot escalate. There is no fuel, no future projection, no imagined catastrophe, only sensation observed. This is the instant shift. Fear arrives as tension. It seeks a story. If you do not provide one, it dissolves, and what remains is not calm, but steadiness, not confidence, but rootedness. This is why the Shaolin principle works not gradually, but immediately. Fear does not end because it is defeated. It ends because it is no longer obeyed. And this is where the teaching becomes personal, because the Shaolin were never speaking only to monks in distant mountains. They were speaking to anyone who feels fear. Tighten the chest, pull the breath upward, scatter the mind. The moment fear appears, life is asking one question: will you stay or will you leave? Most people leave without noticing. They leave into planning, into distraction, into control, into noise, and fear follows them there. But when you remain in the body, fear cannot follow. It has no legs, no hands, no voice of its own. It borrows all of that from your absence. So the practice is simple, but not easy. When fear arises, do not correct it. Do not analyze it. Do not explain it. Feel the feet, feel the breath, feel the posture holding you. Let fear be felt without being obeyed. This is not a technique. It is a return to the only place fear has no authority. Here, now, in the body. This is the hidden Shaolin principle, and it is always available instant fear appears. In the late Ming Dynasty, a young novice named Liang trained at a remote Shaolin outpost. He was disciplined, physically strong, and exceptionally fast. But whenever combat training intensified, something broke inside him. His breath shortened, his muscles tightened, his mind scattered. Before every sparring match, his thoughts raced. What if I fail? What if I freeze? What if I embarrass myself? His technique collapsed under pressure. Other monks whispered, "He has skill, but no root. He moves, but he is not grounded." Liang trained harder, longer stances, more repetitions, stricter discipline. Nothing worked. One evening, after another failure, Liang approached his master. "Master," he said quietly, "why does fear defeat me before the fight even begins?" The old monk looked at him for a long time. Then he said one sentence that would change Liang's life. "You are afraid because you leave the moment fear arrives." Leave? He had never gone anywhere. Yet that night, as Liang sat alone in the courtyard, he began to see it. Fear appeared, and instantly his attention fled upward, into thoughts, into outcomes, into imagined failure. His body remained in the training ground, but his awareness did not. He was already losing the fight before a single strike was thrown. At dawn, the master called him outside. "Stand," he said. No stance, no technique, no movement, just standing. Minutes passed. The more. Liang felt discomfort rise, heat in the chest, tension in the legs, restlessness everywhere. His mind reached for escape. The master's staff struck the stone beside him. "Do not leave," the master said calmly. "Feel." Liang obeyed. He stopped adjusting, stopped resisting. He stayed with the weight in his feet, the tightness in his breath, the trembling in his muscles. Something unexpected happened. The fear did not grow. It softened, not because it was defeated, but because it was finally allowed to exist. And for the first time, Liang remained. Remaining felt unfamiliar, almost dangerous. Liang waited for the fear to surge back, to punish him for not resisting. It did not. It lingered for a moment, then loosened its grip. The master watched without comment. "Again," he said, and so they repeated it, day after day, standing, feeling, not correcting, not escaping. Each time fear appeared, Liang stayed a little longer. Each time he stayed, fear lost another layer of urgency. It no longer demanded action. It no longer shouted. It became a sensation, pure, manageable. The master finally spoke. "You see now," he said, "fear was never attacking you. You were abandoning yourself, and fear was filling the empty space." Liang felt the truth of this settle deeply. His training shifted, not more effort, less interference. When fear arose, he did not prepare for battle. He returned to the body, feet, breath, posture, and in that return, something fundamental changed. Fear still came, but it is no longer decided. Liang was no longer practicing how to fight. He was learning how to remain whole when fear arrived. And that, he sensed, was the route he had been missing all along. The master did not explain immediately. Instead, he asked Liang to stand still. Do not breathe deeply, do not relax, do not control anything, just stand. Within seconds, Liang felt it. Tension in the chest, heat in the stomach, restlessness in the legs, fear. Liang tried to calm himself. The master struck the floor with his staff. "Stop," he said. "Do you feel fear?" "Yes." "Where is your mind?" Liang hesitated. "In my thoughts, trying to get rid of it." The master nodded. "This is the mistake," he said. "When fear arises, you abandon the body and flee into the mind." The Shaolin observed this clearly. Fear is physical first, mental second. But most people respond mentally, analyzing, judging, imagining outcomes. This creates panic. Fear itself is only a sensation. What overwhelms you is leaving the present moment. The Shaolin principle begins here. Do not escape fear. Stay inside it. Staying inside fear does not mean indulging it. It means refusing to run. The master watched Liang closely. "Fear is not asking you to think," he said. "It is asking you to stay. When you leave the body, fear grows teeth. When you remain, fear reveals its true nature." He placed Liang's attention downward. "Feel your feet," the master said, "not the idea of them, the weight." Liang felt the ground press back. "Feel the breath, not deeper, not slower, just present." The sensations sharpened. The fear did not disappear, but it no longer spreads. It stayed contained, like fire without wind. The master nodded. "This is the gate," he said. "Most people never step through. They try to control fear, to silence it, to overpower it. But fear does not yield to force. It yields to presence." Liang stood in stillness, fear alive in his body, yet strangely manageable. For the first time, fear did not own him. He was still here, and that was enough. The master lowered his staff. "Remember this moment," he said, "not with memory, but with the body. Fear will return. It always does. But now you know the difference between being afraid and being taken by fear." Liang remained standing. The sensations shifted again, subtle, fading, not pushed away, not dismissed, completed. The master walked past him slowly. "This is why we begin with stillness," he said. "Movement comes later. If you cannot remain when nothing is happening, you will not remain when everything is." Liang felt a quiet confidence settle in his posture. Not excitement, not relief, stability. The master stopped at the edge of the courtyard. "When fear appears," he said without turning, "do not ask what to do. Ask where you are." Liang understood, not in thought, not in outcome. Here, in the body, in this breath. The training had not ended. It had just begun, and this time, he would not leave. The next morning, Liang was not given combat training. He was sent to the courtyard. "Stand," the master said. "Feet shoulder-width apart, knees soft." For hours, Liang stood. Whenever fear appeared, discomfort, doubt, impatience, he was instructed to do only one thing: feel the body, not the story, not the meaning, not the outcome, just sensation, weight in the feet, pressure in the legs, breath moving in and out. "This is the hidden Shaolin principle," the master said. "Fear cannot survive full embodiment. Fear feeds on imagination, on future projection, on mental escape. But when awareness drops into the body, fear loses structure. It becomes heat, tightness, energy, no enemy, no threat, just sensation passing through awareness." Liang discovered something shocking. The moment he stopped resisting fear, it dissolved on its own, not slowly, instantly. Liang stood in silence, astonished. Fear had arrived as it always did, but this time it did not stay. There was no battle, no victory, no effort, only presence. The master circled him slowly. "You see now," he said, "fear is not strong. It is unmet. When sensation is avoided, it multiplies. When sensation is entered fully, it completes itself." Liang felt the truth of this not as an idea, but as an experience. Fear no longer demanded action. It no longer commanded movement. It rose, it peaked, it passed. The master stopped in front of him. "Remember this," he said quietly. "Fear does not need to be solved. It needs to be felt. When you stop leaving the body, fear has no place to follow you." Liang bowed deeply. In that moment, he understood that the training had changed, from learning how to fight to learn how to remain. And remaining, he sensed, was the beginning of real power. Remaining did not make Liang passive. It made him exact. The master watched as days passed. Liang moved less, but nothing was wasted. When fear appeared, there was no reaction, no correction, only attention settling downward. The body stayed whole. What once scattered him now gathered him. The master spoke again, days later. "Most men believe power comes from doing," he said. "They exhaust themselves trying to control the moment. But power comes from not leaving the moment." Liang felt the weight of the words in his bones. He began to understand that strength was not something added, it was something uncovered. Every time he remained, another layer of unnecessary tension fell away. What was left was simple: presence, stability, readiness. Not readiness to attack, but readiness to respond. The master nodded. "This is why fear dissolves," he said. "It cannot survive where nothing is rejected." Liang bowed again. The courtyard was silent, but it was not empty. It was full of something steady, something alive. Liang sensed it clearly now. Remaining was not a weakness. It was the source from which all true action naturally arose. From that steadiness, movement began to change, not faster, cleaner. When Liang lifted a hand, there was no excess tension. When he stepped, nothing lagged behind. Action no longer came from urgency, but from necessity. The master observed without interruption. "This," he said one evening, "is what remains when fear is no longer resisted. Not courage, not confidence. Accuracy." Liang understood. Fear had once fractured him, pulling attention away from the moment. Now it did the opposite. It gathered him. When fear appeared, it brought him back to the feet, to the breath, to the weight of now. Training continued as before. Forms, sparring, work, But beneath it all, there was no longer a struggle, only participation. Liang had stopped trying to be fearless. He had learned to be present. And presence, once rooted, required no effort to maintain. It held, like the ground beneath the courtyard, unchanging, supporting every step without announcement. This was the quiet mastery the Shaolin guarded, not something to display, not something to claim, something to remain within. And in remaining, Liang knew he would never be taken by fear again. Modern science confirms what the Shaolin mastered centuries ago. Fear activates the amygdala, the brain's threat detection system. But sustained fear requires a mental narrative. The body reacts. The mind amplifies. When attention is fully anchored in physical sensation, the narrative collapses. No future, no catastrophe, no identity at risk, just sensation observed. This shifts control from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, the center of regulation and awareness. That is why fear ends instantly when presence is complete. Not because fear is gone, but because it no longer controls behavior. The Shaolin did not try to be fearless. They trained to remain rooted. Rooted monks do not freeze. They do not panic. They do not flee inward. They stay. And fear, finding nothing to attach to, dissolves. The Shaolin never needed words like neuroscience. They watched the body. They watched the mind. They saw the same pattern again and again. A mind that runs creates fear. A body that is inhabited ends it. This is why Shaolin training always returned to the basics. Standing, breathing, posture, not to calm the mind, but to anchor it. A mind without an anchor drifts. A drifting mind feeds fear. But when awareness is rooted in the body, fear has no direction. It cannot pull you forward. It cannot push you back. It loses authority. This is the difference between a monk who panics and a monk who remains still while chaos moves around him. Stillness is not passivity. It is containment. Fear burns itself out when it is held without resistance. And what remains is not emptiness, but clarity. Clear enough to act. Clear enough to wait. Clear enough to do nothing until something real is required. This was the true strength behind the Shaolin calm. That calm was never fragile. It did not depend on silence, on safety, or on ideal conditions. It was trained inside pressure. The Shaolin understood that fear does not need chaos. It only needs movement without grounding. So they trained where fear appeared naturally, in long stillness, in physical strain, in uncertainty, in not knowing what came next. They did not distract themselves. They did not seek comfort. They stayed with sensation until sensation completed itself. This is why their presence carried weight. When others rushed, they remained. When others reacted, they observed. And when action was required, it emerged without hesitation and without excess. Clarity born from stillness is not slow. It is precise. It does not waste movement. It does not argue with reality. This was the real discipline. Not forcing the mind to be quiet, but giving it somewhere solid to rest. When the body is fully inhabited, the mind stops searching for escape, and fear, no longer fed by drift or imagination, finishes its work and dissolves. What remains is a calm that does not need to be protected, a calm that can move, can strike, can speak, or can wait without losing itself. This was the hidden strength behind every Shaolin stillness. Weeks later, Liang was called to spar. This time, his master gave one instruction: do not try to win. Do not try to perform. Stay in the body. The match began. Fear rose instantly, but instead of thinking, Liang felt. Feet on the ground, breath in the chest, hands moving. His opponent attacked. Liang did not plan. He did not hesitate. His body responded naturally, clear, direct, precise. For the first time, fear did not slow him. It sharpened him. After the match, the master said, "You did not defeat fear. You refused to abandon yourself." This is the Shaolin secret. Fear is not the problem. Disconnection is. When you stay embodied, Fear becomes fuel, not obstruction. The exchange ended before Liang realized it had begun. There was no memory of choosing movements, no recall of decisions, only motion arising from stillness. His opponent stepped back, confused. Liang stood exactly where he was, breathing, grounded. Fear was still present, but it had changed. It no longer pulled attention away. It sharpened perception. The master approached. "This is what happens," he said, "when fear is no longer resisted. It stops demanding control and begins offering information. Fear shows timing, it shows distance, it shows reality, but only to those who do not flee from it." Liang bowed. In that moment, he understood the difference between courage and presence. Courage pushes forward. Presence does not need to. Presence remains. And in remaining, the body knows exactly what to do. This was the Shaolin way. Not mastery over fear, but unity with it. And unity, once established, could not be shaken. The master watched in silence, not evaluating technique, not measuring speed. Watching presence, he saw a body that no longer waited for permission from the mind, a breath that did not rush ahead, a stance that did not collapse under pressure. "This," the master said softly, "is what training was always for. Not to remove fear, not to replace it with confidence, but to stand so completely here that fear has nowhere to pull you." Liang felt the truth of it settle deeper than understanding. Fear still arrived, but it arrived differently, not as an order, not as a threat, as information, a tightening that revealed distance, a surge that revealed timing, a signal that sharpened awareness. Fear had become part of the field, not the center of it. The master turned away. "Remember," he said, "when fear no longer controls movement, it becomes an ally." Liang remained where he stood, feet rooted, breath steady. He knew this moment would not last forever. No moment does. But he also knew something else now. Whatever came next, he would not abandon himself again. And that knowing was unshakable. Unshakable did not mean unchanging, it meant rooted. Liang understood this as the days passed. Fear continued to visit, before sparring, before instruction, before the unknown, but it no longer arrived to an empty place. It arrived to a body that stayed, to a breath that did not flee, to awareness that did not scatter. The master never praised him, never corrected him. There was no need. The teaching had taken root below words. Liang moved through training without urgency, not slower, more precise, not softer, more stable. He had stopped trying to overcome fear. He had learned how to contain it, and containment changed everything. Fear no longer dictated direction. It refined perception. It did not cloud judgment, it clarified it. The master watched from afar and knew the training was complete, not because Liang was fearless, but because he was whole enough to stand in fear without leaving himself. This was the quiet threshold few ever crossed, beyond effort, beyond control, into presence, and presence once embodied could not be taken away. This principle was never meant only for warriors. The Shaolin applied it everywhere, before speaking difficult words, before facing illness, before uncertainty. Fear arises, the body tightens. Instead of escaping into thought, they return to sensation. Feet, breath, posture. This works in modern life exactly the same. Before a conversation, before a decision, before stepping into the unknown. Do not ask, "How do I stop fear?" Ask, "Where is my body right now?" Fear cannot dominate someone who remains embodied. Presence is not calmness, it is stability. And stability dissolves fear faster than confidence ever will. Stability does not mean comfort. It means you do not collapse inward when pressure arrives. The Shaolin understood this deeply. A tree does not survive storms by being soft or rigid, but by having roots that reach deeper than the wind can touch. When fear appears, most people rise into their heads, plans, scenarios, control. The Shaolin sank downward, into the legs, into the breath, into the weight of the moment. They did not try to feel better. They tried to feel what it was, and what is, when fully felt, is never unbearable. This is why presence works when techniques fail. Techniques require effort. Presence requires honesty. You do not overcome fear by becoming stronger than it. You outlast it by remaining. When the body is fully inhabited, fear has no structure to build upon. It cannot command movement. It cannot dictate retreat. It rises. It dissolves. And what remains is not bravery, but something far more reliable. Grounded clarity. Grounded clarity is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not seek reassurance. It does not rush towards certainty. It simply stands. The Shaolin did not measure strength by how much pressure one could apply, but by how much pressure one could contain. Contain fear, contain uncertainty, contain the unknown without collapsing inward. This is why their presence was unsettling, not aggressive, not threatening, unmovable. When a person is fully rooted, fear finds no leverage. There is nothing to grip, nothing to push against. The body remains, the breath remains, awareness remains. Action, when it comes, emerges cleanly, not from panic, not from urgency, but from alignment. This is the final distinction. Fear-driven action seeks escape. Presence-driven action seeks accuracy. One reacts, the other responds. And response, born from grounded clarity, is always enough. This was the deeper lesson the Shaolin never spoke loudly. They did not teach fearlessness. They taught immovability, and immovability ends fear's influence without ever needing to fight it. Immovability was never rigid. It was a relationship with sensation, with weight, with breath, with what is happening now. The Shaolin did not brace against life. They met it. When pressure arrived, they did not harden. They settled. Like stones in a river, they did not stop the current. They allowed it to pass without being carried away. This is why fear could not govern them. Fear requires imbalance. A tilt forward into anticipation, or backward into avoidance. Immovability lives in the center, not frozen, not reactive, available. When the body is fully present, there is no excess movement, no flinching, no rushing, no retreat disguised as strategy. Only what is needed, when it is needed, nothing more. This is why their actions appeared effortless. Effort was not removed. Waste was. And in the absence of waste, fear had nothing to amplify. What remained was a quiet readiness that did not depend on courage, motivation, or belief. It depended on staying with sensation, staying with pressure, staying with oneself. This is the teaching hidden in plain sight. You do not need to become different. You need to stop leaving. And when you stop leaving, fear no longer decides who you are or how you move. It simply arrives, does its work, and passes while you remain. Months later, Liang had changed, not louder, not aggressive, not fearless, grounded. When fear appeared, he did not flinch. He did not analyze. He stayed. Other monks noticed. "You feel different," they said. Liang understood why. Fear no longer defined his actions. It came, it passed. The master finally spoke. "Most people try to transcend fear. We teach something simpler." "What is that?" Liang asked. "Do not leave yourself. That is all." The Shaolin path is not about removing darkness. It is about standing firmly within it. Silence followed the master's words. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of something finally settling. Liang felt it in his body first. A heaviness in the feet, a calm weight in the chest, as if his bones were sinking into the earth. For the first time, fear did not push him forward or pull him back. It simply existed. And because it was allowed to exist, it had no power. The master continued, his voice low. "Darkness is not removed by light," he said. "It is revealed by stillness. When you run from fear, you give it movement. When you fight it, you give it strength. When you stay, it has nowhere to go." Liang bowed deeply. In that moment, he understood something that no form, no strike, no scripture had taught him. Courage was never the absence of fear. It was the refusal to abandon oneself when fear arrived. From that day on, Liang trained the same way he lived. When doubt appeared, he stayed. When pain appeared, he stayed. When uncertainty appeared, he stayed. And slowly, quietly, fear stopped announcing itself as an enemy and revealed itself as a teacher. This was the way of Shaolin, not to escape the storm, but to stand so firmly within it that the storm passed through without taking you with it. Other monks noticed not because Liang spoke differently, but because he moved less. No urgency, no excess. When challenged, he did not tense. When corrected, he did not shrink. There was a weight to his presence, as if he had finally settled into his own body. The master watched from a distance. He saw a monk who no longer tried to outrun fear, nor outgrow it. Liang had learned something rarer. He had learned how to stay with discomfort without hardening, stay with uncertainty without collapsing, stay with fear without obeying it. This was the quiet completion of the training. No ceremony, no announcement. Only a man who no longer disappeared when life applied pressure. And this, the master knew, was the true inheritance of Shaolin. Not techniques, not forms, but the ability to remain whole when everything inside demands escape. The storm would return. It always does. But Liang would not leave himself again. And because of that, nothing that arrived could ever truly take him. Fear will visit you again. It always does. The question is not whether fear appears, but whether you disappear when it does. The hidden Shaolin principle is simple, but absolute. Stay in the body. Stay present. Do not escape. Fear collapses instantly when it is fully met. Not tomorrow, not after years of work. Now. This is not bravery. It is rooted in awareness. And rooted awareness cannot be shaken. This is why the Shaolin were unmovable, not because they felt nothing, but because they never abandoned themselves. The moment fear arises, return to sensation, and you will discover something quietly powerful. Fear was never the enemy. Disconnection was. This is the final teaching. Fear does not ask to be defeated, it asks to be met. Every moment you remain, you reclaim yourself. Every moment you stay in the body, you restore wholeness. There is no special posture, no ritual, no performance, only honesty. Feet on the ground, breath in the chest, awareness where you are. That is enough. The Shaolin did not seek control over life. They sought intimacy with it, to feel fully without retreat, to stand fully without armor. And in that intimacy, fear lost its throne. Not because it was cast out, but because it was no longer obeyed. So when fear arrives again, and it will, do not prepare, do not resist, do not run, remain. Remain with the body, remain with sensation, remain with yourself, and you will find again and again that what stays cannot be shaken. This is how the path continues, not forward, not upward, but inward. Each time fear appears, it becomes a doorway, not to escape, but to return. Return to the body, return to weight, return to breath, and with each return, something ancient awakens. A steadiness that does not depend on certainty, a strength that does not require aggression, a clarity that does not demand answers. This is not something you achieve once and keep forever. It is something you practice by not leaving. Again and again and again, life will test this in moments of loss, in moments of exposure, in moments when control dissolves, and each time the question will be the same. Will you flee into thought, or will you remain with what is? The Shaolin chose to remain. That is why they were not ruled by fear. That is why they could stand where others collapsed. Not because they were extraordinary, but because they stayed ordinary, fully, completely here. This is the hidden principle, and it is available in this breath, in this body, in this moment. Nothing more is required, and because nothing more is required, nothing needs to be added. No belief, no identity, no promise of becoming someone else, only the willingness to stop leaving. The Shaolin never chased enlightenment. They did not chase fearlessness. They did not chase mastery. They returned again and again to the body when the mind scattered, to the breath when the chest tightened, to the ground when uncertainty rose. This is why their strength aged well, why it did not depend on youth, speed, or force. Presence does not fade, it deepens. Even now, fear will test you, not to defeat you, but to ask a question. Are you here? And each time you answer with your body, with your breath, with your staying, fear loses another layer of power. Not dramatically, not violently, quietly, until one day you notice that fear still visits but no longer decides. And in that moment, without effort, without announcement, you step into the same ground the Shaolin stood upon. Ordinary, rooted, unshakable, here, now. That is the path, and it has always been beneath your feet.